Captain Kim Ji-won adjusted her uniform as she stepped off the transport vessel onto the gleaming floor of the Galactic Defense Academy. The enormous domed structure, built into an asteroid at the edge of the Proxima system, housed the finest military minds of 17 spacefaring species. And now for the first time it would host a human, Captain Kim, said a tall, blue-skinned alien with 4 eyes arranged in a diamond pattern. I am Professor Lee, head of strategic operations. We did not expect to place you in advanced courses so quickly. Ji-won smiled politely. Thank you for the opportunity, Professor. Earth is eager to contribute to galactic security. Professor, Lee's upper eyes blinked in what Ji-won had learned indicated discomfort. Behind him, a shorter reptilian figure stepped forward. Commander Park, the reptilian introduced himself, his scales shifting from green to a cautious yellow. I will be your tactical instructor. I have studied your planet's history. It is concerning. Concerning? Ji-won asked, maintaining her smile. 17 major wars in a single millennium, Park said. Your species evolved on what our classification system terms a death world. We have much to discuss. The metallic halls of the academy echoed with the sounds of various species as Ji-won followed her new instructors. Students with tentacles, wings and extra limbs moved aside, their eyes stalks and sensory organs, turning to watch the human pass by. Whispers in dozens of languages followed her. Deathworlder, apex predator, war species. Ji-won kept her face neutral, though she noted every reaction. Earth's intelligence briefings had prepared her for this. Humans were the newest members of the Galactic Confederation, and their reputation preceded them. Professor Lee stopped at a doorway that slid open to reveal a small room with a bed, desk, and bathroom facilities. Your quarters. The gravity and atmosphere have been adjusted to Earth standards, he said. Classes begin tomorrow at first rotation. You have been assigned to advanced tactical theory, diplomatic protocols, and galactic military history. Thank you, Ji-won replied. I've studied the curriculum extensively. Commander Park's scales flickered to a deep blue. Studied? How? Our teaching materials are not available on Earth yet. We have our ways, Ji-won said with a slight smile. Earth believes in preparation. The two aliens exchanged looks. Rest well, Captain, Professor Lee said. Tomorrow will be challenging. After they left, Ji-won unpacked her small bag, placing a photo of her family on the desk. Her father and mother in their military uniforms, her younger brother in his cadet uniform, 3 generations of service to Earth's combined defense force. She activated her comm unit, sending an encrypted message back to Earth Command. Phase 1 complete. Academy integration proceeding as expected. Alien reaction to human presence. Confirms intelligence assessment. They fear us. The next morning, Ji-won entered the classroom for advanced tactical theory. The room fell silent as she took a seat. 20 students from various species watched her warily. Professor Lee stood at the front, his 4 eyes scanning the room. Today, we welcome our first human student, Captain Kim Ji-won of Earth. As you know, Earth joined the Confederation only 3 cycles ago after demonstrating faster-than-light capability. Captain Kim, perhaps you could introduce yourself. Ji-won stood, her posture perfect from years of military training. Thank you, Professor. I am honored to represent Earth at this esteemed institution. I look forward to learning from you all and sharing perspectives from my world. A tall, thin alien with purple skin raised a spindly arm. Is it true humans still practice actual physical combat as part of military training? Not just simulations? Yes, Ji-won answered simply. We believe in preparing for all contingencies. But physical violence is so primitive, the alien said. So is underestimating your enemy, Ji-won replied calmly. Commander Park entered the room, his scales now a professional green. Enough questions. Today's lesson. Response strategies to unexpected aggression. The first principle of Confederation. Doctrine is proportional response. We never escalate beyond the threat level presented. He activated a holographic display showing a small outpost under attack. Your assignment, design a defense plan for Outpost Zeta 9, currently facing raiders. Remember, minimal casualties on both sides is the goal. As students began working, Jiwon studied the hologram carefully. The raiders' attack pattern seemed familiar to her. She had seen something similar in Earth's historical records of guerrilla warfare. Their approach wasn't random. They were testing defenses, probing for weaknesses. She began working on her solution, knowing already that her approach would shock her classmates. Humans understood something these peaceful species did not. Sometimes the kindest strategy was the one that ended conflict most quickly, even if it seemed harsh at first glance. Tomorrow would indeed be challenging for everyone. The 11th Protocol clearly states that orbital bombardment is prohibited even as a deterrent display, Professor Lee lectured, his 4 eyes scanning the classroom. The psychological impact on civilian populations. But what if the bombardment targets only uninhabited areas? Jiwon interrupted, causing several classmates to emit their species' equivalent of a gasp. Captain Kim, the purpose is to avoid escalation entirely, Lee responded. With respect, Professor, a small demonstration of force often prevents larger conflicts. Earth history shows that Earth history, interrupted a jellyfish-like student named Han, is precisely why such protocols exist. The classroom fell into uncomfortable silence. Jiwon noticed several students shifting away from her. The blue-skinned student to her left extended its protective membrane, creating a physical barrier between them. Professor Lee's 4 eyes blinked in sequence. Perhaps we should look at case studies where diplomacy prevented conflict. His visual stalk swiveled toward the display board, clearly eager to move past the disruption. Jiwon made notes, but said nothing more. She had learned this lesson in her first week at the academy. Her ideas made the others uncomfortable, yet she couldn't stop herself from challenging their assumptions. On Earth, her strategic thinking had earned her promotions. Here it made her an outsider. After class, Commander Park approached her in the corridor. "Your participation is noted, Captain Kim," he said, scales rippling with color patterns Jiwon hadn't seen before. "I apologize if I disrupted the lesson," she replied, not entirely meaning it. "No need. Different perspectives are valuable." His scales settled on a deep blue, though perhaps understanding when to share them is equally valuable. Later that day, Jiwon entered the tactical simulation chamber. The room was a perfect sphere, its walls capable of projecting any environment. Today it displayed a small colony nestled between mountains on a dusty red planet. 20 students stood in a circle around the projection. Commander Park's scales glowed a professional green as he entered. Today's simulation. Colony World Epsilon 9 faces raider threats from nomadic Vril groups. The colony has requested Confederation assistance. Your task: design a defensive strategy that resolves the situation with minimal casualties on both sides. The students nodded. One by one, they offered their solutions. A tall avian student with iridescent feathers went first. "We should establish diplomatic contact with Vril leadership, offer trade agreements that benefit both parties." A 4-armed amphibian suggested, "Install minimal defense grids around the colony, non-lethal deterrence only. Show peaceful intentions, but preparedness." Han, the jellyfish student, pulsed with light as he spoke. "Research Vril culture to understand their needs. Perhaps the raids are based on misunderstanding or resource scarcity we can address." Commander Park nodded at each suggestion, his scales showing approval. Then he turned to Jiwon. "Captain Kim, your thoughts?" The room went quiet. All eyes, stalks, and sensory organs turned toward her. Jiwon knew she should offer something similar to her classmates, something that wouldn't mark her further as an outsider. But she couldn't bring herself to suggest tactics she knew would fail. "Identify and eliminate their leadership structure," she said casually, as if discussing the weather. "Disrupt their supply chains, deploy misinformation to create internal conflicts, and establish forward operating bases in their territory." The silence that followed was absolute. A student with crystalline skin actually cracked slightly in shock. Han vibrated in distress, his translucent body rippling. "That would provoke total war," he said, voice modulator pitched higher than usual. Jiwon shook her head. "No, it would end the conflict before it begins. The Vril would accept terms within weeks instead of fighting for years." Commander Parks, Scales flickered rapidly between colors before settling on a neutral green. "Explain your reasoning, Captain." Ji-won stepped forward, activating the simulation controls. The projection zoomed in on the Vril encampments surrounding the colony. The Vril raiders show organized patterns in their attacks. See these formations? They're probing for weaknesses, testing response times. Traditional Confederation protocols call for minimal defensive measures and diplomatic outreach. She manipulated the display, showing predicted attack vectors, but that approach assumes the Vril want peaceful resolution. Their behavior indicates otherwise. They're preparing for full assault. She highlighted several key positions. By targeting their command structure first and creating confusion in their ranks, we prevent the large-scale attack they're planning. It's not about fighting a war. It's about preventing one. The room remained silent. Ji-won could feel the judgment in their eyes. They thought her barbaric, violent, dangerous. Commander Park studied the simulation carefully. His scales shifted to a thoughtful blue. "Interesting analysis, Captain Kim," he said finally, "though your proposed methods violate several Confederation protocols." "Protocols designed by species who evolved on garden worlds," Ji-won replied. "Earth is different. We learned different lessons." "Indeed." Park turned to the class. "Tomorrow we will discuss ethical frameworks across different evolutionary paths." Dismissed. As the students filed out, many giving Ji-won a wide berth, she noticed Han lingering behind. "Why do humans always think in terms of conflict?" the jellyfish student asked, his translator rendering his vibrations into words. Ji-won considered this. "We don't. We think in terms of survival. Sometimes that means preventing conflicts before they become deadly." She gestured to the simulation, still showing the colony. "Your approach assumes both sides want peace. Mine assumes both sides want to survive. Sometimes the kindest strategy is the one that ends the threat quickly." Han's lights pulsed in patterns that suggested deep thought. "I find your species terrifying," he admitted. "Good," Ji-won replied with a small smile. "That means you'll never have to fight us." "How you've become quite isolated," Commander Park observed, finding Ji-won alone in the simulation room after hours. "I'm used to it," she replied, not looking up from her tactical display. "Your methods disturb the others." "My methods work." Park's scales shifted to a thoughtful blue. "Explain to me why humans think this way." Ji-won finally looked up. "On Earth, resources were always scarce. Predators always numerous. War was frequent, so we evolved to make it efficient. A quick, decisive victory saves more lives than a prolonged ethical conflict. Your species views mercy and cruelty differently than we do," Park said slowly. "We view results differently," Ji-won corrected. "Your species evolved on worlds where cooperation was the only survival strategy. Ours required both cooperation and competition." Before Park could respond, an alert sounded throughout the academy. "The Krell Dominion has attacked Colony Tau 7, announced a voice. "All senior instructors report to the council chamber." The lights in the simulation room shifted to a pulsing red. Commander Park's scales flashed with alarm, turning a deep crimson. He moved quickly toward the door, then paused and looked back. At Ji-won. "Come with me," he said. Ji-won blinked in surprise. "Sir, I want you to observe. Do not speak unless I ask you to." They hurried through the corridors of the academy. Other students pressed themselves against the walls as alarms continued to sound. Ji-won noticed fear in their movements, tentacles trembling, scales dulling, protective membranes extending. The council chamber was a large circular room with tiered seating. At the center stood a holographic display showing a small colony under attack. Figures in various combat suits fired at buildings while colonists fled. Ji-won recognized the attackers immediately. The Krell, a species known for their rigid hierarchy and territorial expansion. Commander Park took his seat among the other instructors. He gestured for Ji-won to stand behind him. She clasped her hands behind her back, adopting the formal posture taught at Earth's military academy. Professor Lee stood at the center of the chamber, all four of his eyes focused on the display. "The Krell have breached the outer defenses of Tau 7. They ignored all diplomatic channels and warning signals." "How many colonists?" asked an instructor Ji-won hadn't met before. "Approximately 8,000, Professor Lee replied, mostly scientists and farmers. Deploy the shield fleet, suggested one council member, a tall being with glowing skin. Form a defensive perimeter and evacuate the colonists. The shield fleet is 3 days away at maximum speed, Professor Lee said. By then it will be too late. We must try diplomacy again, said another council member. Perhaps the Krell did not receive our first communication. Ji-won bit her lip to keep from speaking. The Krell had clearly chosen their target carefully, a small colony far from immediate help. This wasn't a misunderstanding. It was a calculated test of the Confederation's response. Commander Park seemed to sense her thoughts. He turned slightly, one eye on her, scales shifting to a questioning blue. Captain Kim, what would Earth forces do in this situation? He asked quietly. Every eye in the chamber turned to her. Ji-won stood straighter, keeping her voice even. The Krell have already shown they won't respond to diplomacy. They're testing your resolve, she said. They expect you to follow standard protocols, attempt communication, form defensive lines, prepare for evacuation. And what would you suggest instead? Professor Lee asked, his tone cautious. Strike where they don't expect it, Ji-won said. You have a small patrol vessel near their home system, correct? Professor Lee's eyes widened. Yes, but it's a scientific vessel with minimal weapons. It doesn't need weapons, Ji-won said. Have it broadcast a message directly to the Krell civilian population. Tell them their leaders have started a war that will bring the full might of the Confederation to their homeworld. Meanwhile, send a single strike ship to Tau 7, but not to defend the colony. What then? Asked Commander Park. Target their command ship only, Ji-won said. The Krell follow a strict hierarchy. Without clear leadership, the attack force will fall into disarray. The council members exchanged uncomfortable looks. One of them, a gaseous being contained in a special suit, pulsed with agitation. What? You suggest violates our principles, it said. We do not use misinformation or target command structures specifically. The Krell have already violated your principles by attacking without provocation, Ji-won pointed out. They understand strength and consequences. Show them both. Commander Park's scales had turned a deep, thoughtful blue. Captain Kim's strategy is unconventional by our standards, but the Krell are not responding to our conventional approaches. Professor Lee stared at the holographic display, watching as more buildings fell under Krell fire. Perhaps, he said. Slowly, there are times when we must adapt our methods to protect our people. The council chamber erupted in heated discussion. Some members argued passionately against Ji-won's suggestions, while others reluctantly considered them. Through it all, Ji-won stood silently, aware that she had cracked something fundamental in the Confederation's approach to conflict. When she caught Commander Park watching her, his scales had shifted to a new color she hadn't seen before, a mix of caution and respect. Their forces have bypassed our defensive line at Sector 4, reported Admiral Song, his hologram flickering above the council table. Our standard containment protocols have failed. The Galactic Defense Council members chittered and hummed in distress. Ji-won, invited as an observer, stood silently against the wall until she couldn't remain quiet any longer. The Krell are exploiting your predictability, she said, stepping forward. You're following textbook responses, which they've clearly studied. Captain Kim, Professor Lee warned, this is not your place. With respect, you're losing this battle, Ji-won replied. The Krell expect you to protect all positions equally. Instead, concentrate your forces, abandon these outposts, she highlighted several locations on the map, and strike here, at their command structure. Abandon colonies? Gasped a counselor. Temporarily, Ji-won explained calmly. In Earth's ancient history, a general named Sun once said, appear weak when you are strong and strong when you are weak. Commander Park studied the display, his scales now deep blue. The human strategy has merit. Conventional approaches are failing. The council chamber fell silent except for the soft hum of the holographic display. The blue glow illuminated worried faces of a dozen different species. In the center of the display, red dots representing Krell forces pushed steadily forward against the green of Confederation defenses. Admiral Song's hologram flickered as he turned toward Ji-won. Explain your strategy, human. Ji-won stepped closer to the display. With quick hand movements, she zoomed in on a particular sector. The Krell advance in a standard formation. Their command ships stay here in the rear, protected by forward units. She pointed to several large, red markers. They expect you to defend each colony equally, spreading your forces thin. Instead, pull back from these 3 outposts. A collective gasp rose from the council members. A tall, plant-like being with flowing vines for limbs swayed. In distress. That would leave thousands of colonists undefended, it said, releasing spores that smelled of worry. Only briefly, G1 replied. The Krell will see this as a victory and push forward quickly. Their command ships will advance to coordinate the occupation. That's when you strike. Her finger traced a path around the projected battlefield. Your fastest ships, hidden here behind the moon of Tau 9, can sweep in and target only their command vessels. Professor Lee's 4 eyes blinked in sequence, a sign of deep thought. The Krell have a rigid command structure. Without direct orders, they fall into confusion, G1 finished. I've studied their battle records. Their soldiers are trained to follow orders, not take initiative. Commander Park's scales had shifted to a mix of blue and green, indicating consideration. It could work, but those colonies would suffer casualties before our counterattack. Fewer casualties than if this war continues for months, Ji-won said quietly. Sometimes the path to peace requires difficult choices. An elderly counselor with crystalline skin that reflected the light of the display stood up slowly. I have served on this council for 97 cycles. Never have we deliberately abandoned our people, even temporarily. And never have the Krell been so bold in their aggression, replied Commander Park. Perhaps new threats require new strategies. The council erupted into heated debate. Some members chittered angrily, others hummed in thoughtful tones. Ji-won remained standing by the display, her face calm despite the storm around her. Admiral. Song's hologram raised a hand for silence. While you debate colonies are falling, I need a decision. Professor Lee stepped forward, his tall blue form towering over the display. Captain Kim, if we follow your strategy, what are the projected casualties? Ji-won didn't hesitate. With a coordinated evacuation alert sent before you withdraw forces, civilian casualties could be kept under 20% at the abandoned outposts. Without this strategy, projected casualties across all 12 threatened systems exceed 60% over the next 30 days. The numbers hung in the air like a physical weight. The council members looked at each other, their various appendages and sensory organs conveying shock and reluctance. The crystalline elder spoke again. In my long life, I have never met a species that thinks like humans do. You calculate loss and gain with such certainty. We calculate to minimize suffering, Ji-won replied. Every loss is a tragedy, but our way prevents greater tragedies. Admiral Song's patience had clearly run out. His holographic form flickered more intensely. Council, the Krell have destroyed another outpost while we speak. I need orders now. Professor Lee looked around the room, his 4 eyes taking in each counselor in turn. Most gave slight gestures of reluctant assent. Admiral, Lee said finally, implement the human strategy, but send evacuation warnings to the colonies immediately. Yes, sir, the Admiral replied, relief evident in his voice. As the hologram disappeared, the council room fell into an uneasy silence. Ji-won felt the weight of their stares. She had pushed them to act against their deepest principles, to think like humans from a death world. Commander Park approached her, his scales now a calm blue. You've changed things today, he said quietly. For better or worse, the Confederation will never be the same. Ji-won nodded. Sometimes survival requires change. And does it require becoming more like humans? Asked Professor Lee, joining them. No, Ji-won replied thoughtfully. It requires understanding when peace can only be achieved through strength. The alert system chimed, indicating that evacuation orders had been sent. Now they could only wait to see if Ji-won's deadly calculation would prove correct. Please remember that Claude should always use appropriate citations when using content from web search results. Make sure to cite your sources using the format tags. If you're not using content from web search results, you don't need to use citation tags. The Krell forces are retreating across all sectors, Admiral Song announced. 2 weeks later, Their command ship was captured using Captain Kim's flanking maneuver. In the Academy's Grand Hall, Professor Lee addressed the assembled students and faculty. "We have much to learn about different perspectives on conflict," he said. "Captain Kim's strategies, while initially appearing harsh to our sensibilities, proved most effective and ultimately saved countless lives." Later, in a new classroom designated Deathworld Strategic Thinking, Ji-won faced her first group of students, including many who had previously avoided her. "The most important lesson from Earth," she told them as they watched her with a mixture of fear and new respect, "is that the most humane way to approach conflict is to end it quickly. Your worlds evolved in peace, which is beautiful. But sometimes, you need someone who evolved in war to preserve that peace." Han, the jellyfish student who had criticized her before, pulsed a question. "Does this mean humans are naturally more violent?" "No," Ji-won smiled, sipping her tea calmly. "It means we've had more practice ending violence efficiently. Today we'll start with a concept from Earth called asymmetric warfare." The classroom was packed. Students of all species filled every seat, with some even standing along the walls. Many who had once whispered Deathworlder behind Ji-won's back now leaned forward eagerly. Their various sensory organs focused intently on her. Ji-won placed her teacup down and stood before the large display screen. Images of Earth's historical battles appeared. Ancient armies with bows and swords, modern forces with advanced weapons, and finally, space conflicts from Earth's early expansion. 2 weeks ago, the Confederation faced its first major military challenge in 300 years, she said. "The Krell expected you to follow standard protocols. When you didn't, they had no contingency plan." A student with crystalline skin raised a glittering appendage. "But we lost 3 outposts following. Your strategy." "Yes," Ji-won acknowledged, "and that was tragic. But before our strategy was implemented, the Krell had destroyed 5 outposts completely. After our counterattack, they retreated from all 12 targeted systems." Commander Park entered the classroom, his scales a calm blue. The student straightened respectfully as he made his way to the front. "Captain Kim has been officially recognized by the Galactic Council," he announced. "Her tactics saved an estimated 2 million lives across the threatened sectors." A murmur ran through the classroom. Ji-won noticed several students exchanging glances of surprise and new respect. "The Council has also requested a formal exchange program," Park continued. "More human instructors will join our academy, and selected students will study at Earth's defense academies." This announcement caused even more discussion. A tall avian student with bright plumage spoke up. "Why would the peaceful planets of the Confederation need to learn human war strategies?" Ji-won looked at Commander Park, who nodded for her to answer. "The universe is larger and more dangerous than the Confederation realized," she said simply. "Peace is not just the absence of conflict. Sometimes it must be actively defended." Commander Park's scales shifted to a thoughtful green. "The Krell have requested peace negotiations. Their leaders were impressed by our unexpected tactics." Ji-won turned back to the display, bringing up an image of Earth, a blue-green planet wrapped in swirling white clouds. "My homeworld has known more war than peace," she said quietly. "We evolved on a planet where resources were scarce and threats were constant. We learned to fight because we had to. But our greatest achievement wasn't developing better weapons. It was developing better peace." The room was silent now, every student focused on her words. "The Krell respect strength," she continued. "By showing them that the Confederation could fight effectively, you've actually prevented a longer, bloodier war." Han, the jellyfish student, pulsed with light as he asked, "But doesn't this mean we're becoming more like humans? More violent?" Ji-won smiled. "No, Han. It means you're learning to understand species who think differently than you do, just as I'm learning from you." She picked up her tea again, taking a small sip before continuing. "The greatest strength of the Confederation has always been cooperation between different species. Now you're simply expanding that cooperation to include those of us who evolved on worlds that taught harsher lessons." Another student, a multi-limbed being with large eyes, asked hesitantly, "Are there many worlds like Earth?" "More than the Confederation has encountered," Commander Park answered. "The galaxy is not all garden worlds and peaceful evolution." Ji-won nodded. And that's why we need each other. Your species bring wisdom about cooperation and harmony. Mine brings knowledge about surviving when harmony fails. She touched the display controls, bringing up a tactical simulation, the same, one that had once horrified her classmates. Today we'll learn about asymmetric warfare, how a smaller force can effectively counter a larger one. Then we'll discuss when to use these tactics, and more importantly, when not to. As the students began taking notes, Commander Park moved to stand beside Jiwon. "You've changed them," he said quietly, his scales shifting to a color she hadn't seen before. "And they've changed me," Jiwon replied. "On Earth, I was just another tactical officer. Here, I'm a bridge between worlds." From the back of the room, Professor Lee watched with all four eyes, a new understanding dawning. Perhaps the Deathworlder's arrival wasn't a diplomatic courtesy after all, but the beginning of something the Confederation desperately needed, a wake-up call from a universe less gentle than they had believed.